She said that she knew that I had had a baby because she had Googled me and found my daughter's birth announcement. And I texted her back and I said, please don't contact me anymore, but I hope you have a great life. Like, just leave me alone. And she texted me back and she told me that she hopes that I'll feel soon what it's like to lose a child.
I'm JAIMIE BEEBE.
And I'm Jake DEPTULA. On today's episode, we're chatting with Chloe.
Chloe has been stalked by her birth mother for most of her life.
She's an amazing survival story, and we're here to talk to her about it right now.
Welcome, Chloe.
Hello.
So why don't you just go ahead and start off and kind of tell us about your life, how you grew up and your childhood?
Yeah. So I actually grew up here in the Los Angeles area. I was adopted when I was first born. So like 3 days after I was born, I went to my parents and grew up here. And so I went to all like the local schools and stuff like that. I knew I was adopted when I was 5. My parents like sat me down. I thought it was like one of the most devastating things ever. I didn't want that to be true. I absolutely love my family. My family is amazing. And just kind of always wanted to be a part of that family. I never had any interest in looking into my birth family and things like that. My parents had an agreement with my birth mother that they would send her pictures and updates until I was 6 years old. My mother decided to continue sending her those pictures and things like that afterwards. Until I was about 12, 13 years old. And it was at that point that my birth mother had become very pushy. According to my mother and my father, this was their story, that she would call all the time. She would always like write letters. She would call my dad at work. It got to a point where my mom became very uncomfortable and my father told her not to call again. But I went back and I found my Xanga journals from online. If you guys remember Xanga, it was like they had like live journal, dead journal, Xanga. So I had my diary on there. And first of all, I was a total idiot. As a 13, 14-year-old girl, just rambling on about boys and stuff like that. But I found the post that I had written, and I got a call. And it said that it was in they called the classroom, and the teacher was like, there's something's wrong. Your mom's on the phone. You need to go to the front office. So I did. Walked across campus, went to the front office, and the guidance counselor was like, there's been a family emergency. Your mom's on the phone. So she let me go and use her office. And I sat down, I picked up the phone and, said, hello. And the person on the other line was not my mom. It was my birth mother, which is how I prefer to refer to her. I don't ever call her mom, mother, none of that, birth mother. So I didn't really know what to do. At the time, I was 14. So I was kind of like
what did she say to you on the phone?
From what I remember, she was like, this is your mom. Your parents wouldn't let me speak with you. And so this was the only way I could figure out how to contact you. I don't know if you're interested in talking to me, but I really want to get in touch with you. And I didn't really know what to do. So I just kind of talked to her a little bit. She's like, oh, what are you doing right now? And I was like, oh, I'm in English class. And she just started telling me all about her family history. And she just kept talking. And I was like, okay. She'd asked me some questions about me, what I was doing, and all that kind of stuff. And then finally, we hung up the phone. And I went back to class. And I didn't tell anybody about this. She then reached out to me on MySpace. And she reached out to me and she wanted to talk more and stuff like that. And again, I didn't really know what to do. So I did talk to her for a little bit. I was like, oh, this is kind of a little bit about my life. That went on for about 3 months. And then the pushiness, if you will, that's the best word I have for it. It escalated. So she wanted pictures of like me every day. She wanted to have, she wanted pictures of the house, things like that. And this was a motif that repeated itself later on, but we'll get to that. She wanted pictures of my dog, and, just stuff like that, just kind of odd stuff. And she was always trying to compare herself to me, saying how we were so much alike and how we look so similar and how she can't wait for us to get in a band together and go touring around the country singing, and just always wanting to seem like we were exactly the same person and how we were so much alike. Eventually, it got to the point where I can't remember 100% why the first time I cut off contact. And I was like, no. I believe she had said that she wanted to fly out here and come see me, and we were going to go to Universal Studios together, because that's where my parents had actually known her before I was born. They flew her out here to LA. She was from Kansas. They flew her out here and they went to Universal Studios. My sister, actually, who's 9 years older than me, met her. So they all know my birth mother. So they know kind of what she was like. Anyways, she was talking about all the places we could go together, yada, yada, yada. And I just became very, very uncomfortable with that. Somewhere also in between that timeline, she also introduced me to my birth father, who is not a psycho, thank God. And he was a really cool guy, genuinely cool, not pushy, not, any of that kind of stuff. So somewhere between her saying that she wanted to get together and, she wanted to fly out here and come and see me, and she sent me a gift. She sent me a gift at my house. It was like jewelry or something like that. And I remember my dad like picking it up and being like, "Oh, what's this?" And I grabbed it from him and I was like, "It's nothing," because I didn't want their feelings to be hurt, if that makes sense. And it was after she sent that I was like, you know what? I don't want any more contact. I don't want to talk. I'm sorry. I wish you the best, but please leave me alone.
Did your dad know who that was from?
I'm pretty sure he did, but I'm not sure.
How long before, when she first started contacting you, to the point you said, all right, enough? How long was it? Probably
about between like 2 to 3 months. At this point, it was a lot of, she somehow like got my cell phone number as well. And because I never gave it to her, I only talked to her via MySpace and then AIM at the time too. But it was like multiple messages a day, which is probably why now when people text me rapid fire, I'm like, stop it. So then it cut off contact. She continued to try to reach out to me, talk to me, all this kind of stuff. And that's when I told my birth father that I had cut off contact with her because it was getting just too intense for me. And that's when he shared with me the stuff that he had gone through with her. She's had several restraining orders from my birth father's ex-girlfriend that he has a kid with. He also showed me the MySpace page that my birth mother had made of my half-sister, Sophia. And the MySpace page was covered, it was like her picture was like covered in blood, and there was like Die Sophia and like all this kind of like posts that you could see on there. Insane. And Sophia's was 6, or something like that at the time. She's just a little kid. My birth mother did not like that, my birth father had a child with another woman and didn't want her. And that's when I finally told my parents. And, at the time I was like, I just felt very uncomfortable. I was also a place in my life where, I started kind of going down a darker path. I definitely saw myself getting very depressed and anxious. And again, I couldn't process why that was at the time. But I remember asking my parents if I could go to another school in another country. And at the time I loved Harry Potter, huge Harry Potter fan. So it's perfect, Scotland. So I went to boarding school in Scotland.
How did your parents react when you told them that you had contact with her in the first place?
This has always been kind of a sore spot for me, because their reaction was, well, what do you want us to do about it? So I kind of came up with a solution, right? Another country. Those few years that I was in school overseas were the best of my life, because I had no I'd learned how to block people on MySpace at that point. And I don't think I was using AIM either at that time. So I think that was dying out. I don't remember, but and she couldn't get my phone number. It's a British phone number. And so you can't search for those as easily. There's a lot of tricks that you can use to find people's information of phone numbers. Finding it in a different country, if they go to a different country, really hard. And I felt like for the first time I was able to I could breathe again. So I went to college in Indiana, small liberal arts college, and that's when it started again. So I had my same phone number that I had from when I was in high school, and probably 6 months-ish into it, the texts and calls started happening again. And again, it wasn't always like her on the other line, but it's hard to describe. It's like from even those years when I was like 14, or those months when I was like 14, I knew when she would call, because it would be silent, or the area codes were from areas that I knew that she was. It was always like a 512, which is Austin, Texas, or like, yeah, certain part of Texas. And then there was a one in New Hampshire. Every time, like, even if I get a text, I was like, please stop. Like, stop contacting me. Stop getting a hold of me. It was my 18th birthday. She sent me a gift to my college dorm, which at the time, like, again, I used the internet. I'm a millennial. Like, I knew how to use all that stuff, but I had no idea how she got my address. And I remember it was this like heart necklace that had all these gemstones, and it was like, love mom and stuff like that. I was like, so in 2009, so that was a year later, after my 18th birthday, or almost a year later, I was doing an internship in Texas. And at the time, and I don't mean this in any way to come across offensive, but the school I was going to was religious. And so I was like trying to practice like, forgiveness and love, and like trying to like accept those things. And I was like, okay, well, you know what? Maybe I saw this whole thing the wrong way. Maybe I should just try reaching out and, trying to extend that love and forgiveness. Maybe it was just all a big misunderstanding. It wasn't. Spoiler alert. And I tried to reconcile. And so that contact lasted 3 days, because it was right after that where she was asking me for pictures. She wanted pictures of me. She wanted pictures of me like doing different things. And I was like, that's weird. My mom doesn't even want pictures. I'm like, if I sent her one, she'd be like, why'd you do that? It started to get kind of creepy to me. And then she called me. This was on the last, so again, 3 days. On the third day, she calls and she was like, what would you do if you turned around in the bookstore and I was standing right behind you? I didn't tell her I was in Barnes & Noble, which was in this part of Austin, Texas. I didn't tell her that. She didn't know, but she did. She did. And I was like, and I just hung up the phone, and I just went to the cafe and I sat there, and I just didn't know really what to do. And again, during this entire time, I didn't really talk to anybody about it, because nobody really thought it was, I don't know. Like I also didn't really have a word for it. It wasn't until probably shortly after that was like, oh no, she's stalking me. Like that is the word I'm looking for.
Very rarely do we hear this in terms of like your case, like my birth mother is stalking me. So I think that also too, I'm assuming when you told people that, did they say, oh, she just wants to be a part of your life? What did they say?
I can make sense of it now, but at the time I was just like, no, there's something wrong, and I don't like it, and I want it to go away. But if you think about it in any other context, like no parent would do that, like to their kid. If their kids, maybe they'd like send a letter or something, but that stops if the kid's like, nope, I'm cutting you out. Most normal people, when they say stop, they maybe one more time they'll ask. But after that, they let it go. And that was really difficult to, I guess, explain to people, because they're like, they never took it very seriously. And they still don't. In fact, like, and I'll try not to get on a completely other tangent, but I wanted to actually thank you guys, because I was telling my partner, the man I'm dating, that you guys were the first time that ever asked, like, well, how did that impact your life? Mm-hmm. I've been to therapists. I've been to all kinds of things, and nobody's actually ever asked me that question. And again, I love my parents and I love my friends. They are the best people on the planet, but nobody's ever asked me that. And it took me a second. I was like, I don't know. I know that sounds odd, but anyways, thank you for asking that question. It was kind of mind-blowing to me, because no one's ever asked me that.
Well, I think that's the part that we don't see if we read it in the news or, something like that. We don't know how it impacts somebody's life. We don't know the extent is immeasurable, the impact, and it's forever. So I think that it's important for people to know what that impact is.
Well, and it's interesting because it's not just an adaptation of like how you physically protect yourself or your environment. As you know, I'll kind of discuss later, what it's become in the later years is more messing with my mind. It becomes psychological, and that is very difficult to protect against when it's just stuff like that. And even like mixed in, it's always been mixed in, but now it's become pretty much purely that. It's basically just fucking with my mind, which if you think about it, when it comes to stalking, like if you, or going after anybody, it's the ultimate way to get power of somebody. If you can control how they're thinking and how they're feeling. Several of the people use the word cat and mouse game. She used that phrase. She used that phrase with me on more than one occasion. She'd be like, the cat always gets the mouse in the end. Like, she would do stuff like that. So
that's a very important point, because again, most people think, we talked about before, most people think it's like a physical thing. Proximity, I need to get away, but psychologically it's ongoing and you don't know where these things are going to come up.
And that's a different battle you're fighting, because you're not just fighting it with that other person, you're fighting it with yourself and how much you give into. And for me, you also had I had the added layer of, this is technically a blood relation. So how much am I like that person? She would always talk about our hair being similar and our eyes being similar. I cut my hair off. Fuck you. Which again, but also trying not to completely pendulum swing and go against all that. But I remember being like, I just want to like, sounds crazy. I was like, I just want to drain all the blood out of my body so I have no connection to her anymore. So after that, cut off contact. And I kept receiving text messages from her between June and November of 2010. And I also received emails. And again, all these emails were always things like, it ran the gamut. It was things like, God forgives you for everything you've done to me. She would also always tell me that my birth father was lying to me. And he's like, Rick is telling you lies. And I was like, I never talked to him, but okay. And then she would tell me things about her. Sometimes she would just write emails telling me things about her life. And I'm like, I don't care. And then in November, I received an email, November of 2010, saying that she was going to kill herself. She then gave my cell phone number to like a distant relation of hers in Indianapolis and had him call me and talk to me and try to like get me to talk to her again and all that kind of stuff. And I was like, and I picked up the phone because I didn't know it was an Indiana area code. So I was like, oh, okay, it's fine. No. I talked to him and he was like, oh, if you ever want to talk to me again. I was like, okay, sure. I also learned that placating and going along with it, sometimes like works sometimes, and other times it didn't work. There's a variety of different tactics I would have to use with her if she'd get me on the phone. It was in July or August of 2011. This was probably one of the creepiest parts for me. In July or August of 2011, I had adopted a cat from a local shelter. I was trying to find a home for this cat after that because the cat like scratched my dog in the eye and like all this stuff. So I was trying to find another home, and I posted an ad on Craigslist. But I didn't post my phone number on there. I didn't have anything. It was just like cat and like my kind of like where somewhere near located. She responded to the ad and texted me and goes, I'll be happy to take the cat off your hands and da-da-da-da. And I was like, what the? How did you find the Craigslist ad? It was at that time I changed my phone number. And then I just kept getting emails and stuff from her during that period. And then I just chose not to respond. I had my daughter. She
Congratulations.
was beautiful. In 2011, again, like I kind of had another like revival of like religiosity, and also now I have a kid. Now I have a daughter, and I was like, well, maybe. So I was getting emails and texts from her at this point. It's all the time. So I reached back out and I was like, okay, like I responded to one of them and was like, well, maybe I didn't understand. And I thought maybe, okay, well, now that I've had a kid, I can empathize better with you, and maybe I can, help through anything. She said that she knew that I had a baby because she had Googled me and found my daughter's birth certificate or birth announcement. You have to be careful because when you when you're signing like the birth certificate and all that kind of stuff, there's also usually a piece of paperwork they give you at the hospital that has a checkbox for if you want a birth announcement posted in the newspaper.
Right.
All newspapers are also archived now online. And so if you choose to do that, so note to anyone, make sure you don't check that box unless you want everyone to know and be able to Google that you had that child and where it was, where they were born and what their name is and all that kind of stuff. Again, I was trying very, very, very hard to empathize and understand. And this is when she told me a lot of stuff about herself, about how she had done like different kinds of drugs, but then she was like framed and had to go. It was a lot of... I don't know if you've ever talked to somebody who is not all there. It's a lot of sometimes babbling kind of nonsense and you're not really sure where they're going. And that's how a lot of the phone calls were. I had my husband sit in on a lot of them and just listen. Because I was like, I'm not, like, you're hearing this, right? Again, she went into the whole, like, I want pictures. Can you send me pictures? Send me pictures of your dogs. And because my husband and I also fostered dogs and stuff like that. And so send me pictures of your dogs and send me pictures of your daughter and send me pictures of the house. And then it was the car. And I was like, why? And we had like a barn out back. She wanted pictures of everything. Pictures of me, everything. And it was very, very weird, obviously, for obvious reasons. It came to the point where it's just, I guess I needed the peace of mind to know that like I hadn't been mistaken this entire time and that I wanted to know that I wasn't crazy for having cut off contact, or if I wasn't that I was not in the wrong, I guess, in that way. And that it was for a good reason. Because again, I didn't feel like I could even trust my own judgment this entire time. I suggested, I was like, well, maybe we should get my therapist on the phone. We can talk. She refused all of that. Finally, it was like an explosive conversation. And I was just like, you know what? I'm done. And I texted her back and I said, please don't contact me anymore, but I hope you have a great life. Like, just leave me alone. And she texted me back and she told me that she hopes that I'll feel soon what it's like to lose a child. And I obviously panicked. I didn't hear from her from April. I think I got some emails, but like from April until October of 2012, we had an exchange student that was staying with us. So this is October 10th, 2012. And I was also 3 months pregnant at the time with my son. And my husband and I went out to dinner. And our exchange student was dropped off. She was only going to be home for like an hour by herself. She was dropped off from like a friend's house. And my daughter was staying with my in-laws about like 20 minutes away. When we get a phone call from our exchange student, and she told me that a woman came to the house with a Texas license plate and tried to make her get in the car. She was at the house and she heard a knock, and Veronica, the exchange student, heard a knock at the door. She opened it because the person knew Chloe's name, so my name, and she assumed it must be someone we know, because Veronica didn't just open the door for whoever was standing there. They're like, oh, see if Chloe's here. The woman asked if we were at home, and Veronica answered. My birth mother asked Veronica then to come out to the car with her because she had some gifts she wanted to drop off, and she grabbed Veronica's arm, like to start walking towards her car. And Veronica's like, 1 second, let me grab something. It was October, so it's cold, could have been a jacket. And Veronica promptly shut the door, locked it, and called us. To which, when I answered, she was like, there's this woman here. She, asked me to get in the car. She said she knew you. And I was like, call the police now. By the time the police came, though, she was gone. And it was after that I was like, I'm going to get a restraining order.
So that was your first time contacting police about her?
Correct. To me, that was like pretty big escalation.
What was the process of getting a restraining order like for you? How did you feel? How was it? Was it easy for you to navigate?
It wasn't too difficult because we had that incident where like and I had it was matter of child safety in that regard. Moved here, and then again the emails started, the text started, all that kind of stuff. So I went to another lawyer in San Diego, and she helped actually draft some of the legislation that included blood family relations as part of the domestic, like, so you can get a domestic violence restraining order, which is 5 years versus other ones. And a lot of times it has to be like an intimate partner, but she helped them include the language on blood family relations. And that was a 5-year restraining order. Now, that did not stop her from still reaching out to me. She just got smarter. And it's things like now, there's like apps and stuff you can use to like call people, robocalls, whatever that is. You can do that. And I've had to try to adapt to go along with it. If I was to go into like detail on all the different ways that tried to prevent this, like the restraining order is great. It keeps her from being directly like right in front of my door. But it doesn't mean a whole lot. And I learned that very quickly that none of that matters. She'll just find other ways to get to me. I got a dog, like a gigantic dog. I looked for what kind of, because again, like I said, like that's why I got the carry permit on top of the restraining order. And then I got a gigantic dog. They're called Caucasian Shepherds. They are huge and they are likened to holding a loaded gun. I just got the restraining order renewed in April of last year, so 2019, of last year. And maybe about a week or two later, this was a series of phone calls. So this app, you can put in any number that you want to look like your number is calling from. You can clone any number. And I've showed it to people. And just like, you need to know that this is available. And it has a voice changer and it has background noise that you can add to it. Now, I didn't figure this out until a few months after these phone calls. And I downloaded it and then I clicked on the voice changer and it was the voice I heard on the other end of the phone, which is, by the way, creepy. But these calls weren't just to my cell phone. It was also to my parents' home phone number. And it was her on the other line. It was just like went on and on and on, like just again, like rambling. And then sent me like these crazy like photos and screenshots. Like, again, she was playing up a story. Like this wasn't her at all.
What do you know about her life other than her contact with you? Stalking
charges filed against her by 2 other people other than myself. She bashed in my birth father's girlfriend's car. And she did not do time for that, but received unsupervised probation in Wideneck County in Kansas. Here's another thing to know, though. Her parents are pretty well connected. And so her parents would bail her out every time. They think that she's an innocent angel, nothing's wrong. And then I know that she did felony time in Kansas, but that was for, I think, possession of methamphetamine or the materials to make it. Occasionally what I'll do is I'll go on Facebook and I'll type in her name and I'll look for any new profiles that may look similar with her name on there and block them because that's how she'll do it, right? Yeah. She'll make a new Facebook profile and then that way she can like look at my pictures or whatever. And so I will block them. And so anyways, most recently I saw the newest one is it looks like she got married to somebody from high school, which I'm like, great. I'm actually super thrilled. That means her focus is off me for a while. And that must have been I believe that was very, very recently. So fingers crossed. That means that I'm off the hook for a little while, which is great. However, God forbid that relationship fail because we know what happens when that happens. She goes a little nutso. So I also know that she was living on disability, like I mentioned earlier. She was living on disability at the time and was having like a bunch of health issues. So she wasn't working. You know, when you've gone through anything like being stalked or even domestic violence or whatever it is, you walk the fine line between how much of my life am I willing to give up and sacrifice. I bought a book years ago called How to Be Invisible, but it was basically like how to literally disappear from modern society. And I learned a lot of like certain things, like great tricks, but at the same time I was like, well, I could literally never have a career. I could never, like share things online. Like I could never do any of that. And how much of my life am I willing to completely change to avoid her? for so long, I had to battle with this idea of like, well, nobody can, I have to hide all this stuff. I remember getting rid of social media, everything, and then being like, fuck that. Why the hell come at me?
How have you had to change your life? How has this impacted you?
When I was applying for jobs and all that kind of stuff, I had to explain to you guys, hey, you're gonna have to tell me what number you're calling from, because I now have like several apps on my phone. So, I showed you the incognito one. There's also a RoboKiller that I have on there, which records also anybody who calls in. So any voice or things like that calls in, RoboKiller will, if it automatically rejects any phone call or any phone number that's not saved in your phone. 1, 2, it will record it. So it'll pick up, and you can have like silence, or you can have like a fax machine or whatever it is. There's a variety of different pickup sounds, but it records that. And part of that's really, it was created by people who were scammers, that whole thing. Mm-hmm. It's hilarious, but also very useful. And so I think she picked up on that pretty quickly. I remember my mentor, because I work in human resources, my mentor was like, well, why is your mailbox always full? Like, why do you keep your mailbox full? And he was like, you need to delete that. That's not very professional. And I was like, if you got the kind of messages I got, if you had your inbox full of just silence or like a weird scratching sound or whatever it is, I was like, you do the same thing. She can't leave messages on my phone. Nobody can, because I don't want them to, because I don't know what kind of message I'm going to get.
What do you want people to know if they were in your situation? Who can they turn to? There's
a few books that I've read that were absolutely excellent. I mean, How to Be Invisible was really, really good. Surviving a Stalker was another one that I read, and that's from years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then there's one called Defensive Living. The best advice that I would have for anybody going through this is that absolutely look into how to protect yourself, go through the legal avenues, all that kind of stuff, but make sure you don't lose yourself in the process, and make sure that you're taking care of yourself in the process and talking to somebody consistently through it. Because the problem is that you risk losing your own sanity at the same time. And because you become so scared, you become so anxious, and it literally will starts to consume your life. And it's a terrible place to be, to feel just as crazy as the person who's going after you. Like, that's a terrible feeling. And so that would be my thing, is that, there's so many resources out there. I'm so glad you guys have the links on your website, but there's actually a stalking hotline that I called once, and I thought it was in like Berkeley or Stanford, but I can't remember now. But I called once and I talked to somebody, and it was like the only thing of its kind. Because you can call like the National Domestic Violence Hotline or Crisis Line. Sorry, they're not going to get it in the same way. They'll be like, well, get to a safe place. And I'm like, listen, my mind isn't a safe place at the moment. I'm scared shitless.
Yeah.
So like, not helpful. I feel like the United Kingdom has so many more resources than we do, and so many more like they're talking about doing a registry. I was like, hell yeah. Talking to somebody who's empathetic and who's gone through, not gone through it, but somebody who has worked with people in your similar situation. And you can find that on like psychology.com. You can look at type in like therapists that have, work with stalking victims or domestic violence victims. A lot of times the psychology can be somewhat similar with the anxieties and stuff like that they experience. And so that can be a really good resource, is finding, somebody like that to talk to. And the other big part of it too is when talking to friends or family or like intimate partners, I've had to learn to come from the side, because like part of me was like angry for a long time. Like, why didn't anybody stop this from happening? Like, I would mention it and everybody would look to me like I had the answers. And I'm like, why couldn't somebody help me? Or why don't they think it's that big of a deal? I remember asking somebody else dating to spend the night with me one night because I was super scared. And he was like, oh, you're fine. Like, da da da. And he was like, oh, everything's cool. It's like, no, it's not. Like, I'm freaking out. But, be patient and understanding, because just as you don't understand like whatever's going on in your head, they don't either. They have even less of a clue. And so I think sitting down and having a conversation with your friends and family and partners on how they can support you is important. And no, it's not fair that you should have to do that, but that's where we're at. Like, there's not an education program that's going around like talking to friends and family on how to talk to your friend who's being, like terrorized.
Well, and I think that's the process of fighting back and becoming a survivor.
Yeah.
Rather than staying a victim.
Chloe, we can't thank you enough for sharing your story. I mean, you're so brave, and it's so amazing. You telling us how you got through this, but also at the same point what people can really do to effectively deal with the situation like this.
Yes, thank you so much for joining us. If anyone out there is in need of help or is a victim of stalking, please reach out. You can find a list of resources on our Instagram, Strictly Stalking Pod.
I'm Jake DEPTULA.
And I'm JAIMIE BEEBE. Thank you for joining us on today's episode of Strictly Stalking.